Yeah. So my name's Tajman John. I'm on a YouTube channel called Bars and Joysticks. Pretty much we cover video games, music, hip hop in particular, and culture. And with things like video games and with hip hop, they both intersect with politics. So I cover a lot of the political arena that they intersect with. And yeah, that's about me. I've done a little bit of local organizing, not too much. A little bit of online organizing, like this panel. And yeah, but despite how much you dip your toes into the action pool of doing actions, whether in person or online, I find myself always eventually getting to some sort of form of leftist infighting.
This is sparkling juice and shit.
Hell yeah. Streaming sober is way better than streaming drunk. As someone that's been on 3 drunk panels in the past month, debating like people on like the alt-right and stuff, like doing it sober is a lot better. And I was up against some juggernauts, just one juggernaut yesterday, or someone I consider kind of a juggernaut.
But they're drunk.
No, here's the thing: those motherfuckers will. Sorry, because those mother effers will cheat. All right, so they'll be on something where you
fucking hear you all. Sorry, I'm here.
Hey, he's back. One hand clapping.
Cheers.
Yep.
Cheers.
The undersea internet cables got attacked by sharks. I am very sorry about that. I just had to go and get the harpoon.
Oh no, he's clipping.
Are you kidding? No.
Oh, fuck.
The stingrays. You forgot the stingrays.
Sorry, please continue on. I'll do my introduction when there's a appropriate point.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So what was the drunk? Yeah, the drunk panel I was on was like I don't know if you heard the name Politically Provoked. They're kind of burgeoning. I think like 4,000 followers on their channel. They debate people. I mean, they have people like Destiny and Vosh on their channel. They've had Basquiat on their channel, Counterpoints on their channel, Tyler Bluntman on their channel. Quite a few different people have been on their channel. Bryson Gray, the MAGA rapper, has even been on their channel before. I've been on a few of their panels. And yeah, it's kind of like lots of debate bro blood sports. And I would never recommend doing that drunk. I would never recommend that. Such a horrible idea. It's a mess. But yeah, I don't know why I was talking about that. Oh yeah, they brought up the sober thing. Yeah. All right. So the first hot point for leftist infighting, as this panel is about, leftist fighting within the left, is anecdotes of leftist infighting. Things that stick out to us as like the main thing when you think about leftist infighting, like the breakout leftist infight in your mind. It can either be like a personal experience or like something you've witnessed bigger creators do. What are your thoughts on it? Who wants to go first on that? All right, Frakkle.
Take a.
Okay, so it's not so much something that I've personally experienced, but I do a lot of. So first of all, this is my first panel that I've been a part of. What I typically do is one-on-one conversations with people because I find those much more productive. But a trend that I've noticed on a lot of content creators, especially here on Twitch, many start out with solid intentions, good material, a measured tone, a productive tone, but for right or wrong, that just doesn't really attract as many clicks as getting into the blood sport stuff. And there is kind of a siren song, and I've seen several small creators blow up their channels by jumping on to doing the drama of the day stuff and getting in on all of the gossip stuff and abandoning any of the actual education and pushing people towards actually organizing and all the stuff that actually gets shit done. And it's part of that is that's where money is. And I get if you're trying to do it for a living, there's a strong appeal to go where the money is, but it's disheartening.
Yeah.
I definitely agree with that. Lots of like shock value.
I feel that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm sorry, you can go.
Yeah, I see what you're talking about as far as like making like the blood sports things. It's kind of like using like performance drugs, right? It's like you'll get like a good return, but then there's like a cost that'll just kind of rip things away. Like getting the blood sports, yeah, sure, more people are engaged so they can hear more opinions and form different ideas off those opinions, and you can see people like knock those opinions up or down. But at the same time, it's like it garners audiences and people expecting blood sports, and it normalizes the blood sports thing either in personal interactions online on Twitter, because we all know, I don't know if you guys have Twitter, but that shit's fucking toxic sometimes. Right now I'm getting shot on Twitter for some shit. I said one thing wrong and now I'm getting quote tweeted like crazy.
Gosh, can we each go with our anecdotes and then we'll react as a group?
Yeah, fair. That's fair.
Okay. So I guess I'll go next since we're not doing a stack. So my anecdotes kind of go from actual like organizational side of things, where the big kind of like, say, the ISO is one trot group that just split in the last year, and they basically just decided not to keep going. The other kind that I've personally experienced, or at least I've been in the room for, is the more kind of individualized kind of infighting, where a group has basically excluded a person or two based on its policies, based on some collective decision making that occurred democratically. So even though, because let's say the group is large enough, it's more than 10 people, you can't really do full consensus. Example, over the last so many years, the Green Party, which has been kind of half trot or Luxembourgist socialists and half kind of liberals or left-wing Democrats, has been slowly, in the language and the platform, making ourselves more of a socialist party, to the point where and now basically the party has been taken over by socialists like myself, like our last presidential candidate, Howie Hawkins, which many people didn't even know existed. And so, like in 2016, when we passed our post-capitalist plank, saying that we were at least a post-capitalist party, there was one delegate there who was an identified capitalist, and he obviously felt like now an outsider. Similarly, when the Green Party, which for the longest time has had the positions that we are, say, for modern science, and that means, you know, in a universal healthcare system, you can have alternatives, but it's modern science first. And in fronting a doctor as our candidate a few times, it kind of pisses off anti-vaxxers who might be identified as Greens, or in the case of the TERFs, that it's always been our policy to take people as they identify, even within our gender parity rules, as they were called gender parity, not sex parity. So we have many TERFs in the Green Party that haven't left, but have created conflict with no remorse, as they harass our Lavender Caucus and all kinds of other shit.
The Lavender Caucus, is that the pro-trans caucus?
They are the trans / queer caucus.
Okay.
And the Women's Caucus backed them up as well, by the way.
Good.
In fact, it was the Georgia State Green Party, which Benjamin Dixon of the Black Agenda Report had died. So you had this, let's call him a TERF, who like they had like a minimum quorum, and they passed this resolution in favor, you know, the TERF constitution, you could call it. And most of the rest of the party was like, what the fuck? And obviously the Lavender Caucus like wanted them disaffiliated for this. There was a more of a moderate position of, okay, let's reconcile. Can we get them in a room, virtual of course, to hammer something out or some kind of like agreement, and TERFs didn't want to negotiate, basically. So they were disaffiliated for that. And so there were a number of, there's one in our local chapter who's also an SA member, who is our actual only local candidate this year for school board. He came in a very close third. He was beaten. He was a cis het man, beaten by 2 women of color, but they're in the Democratic Party orbit. Anyway, he's apparently a TERF through like his interpretation of Marxism, and not good politics, which is kind of one of the themes I can go on. The other theme in inner left fighting that I've observed, and this goes in the non-organizational but more collectives, anarchistic, dual power stuff. So it's like different kinds of infighting. On the left communist or left libertarian side, it seems to always come from interpersonal conflict more than anything else. A group called Margination here, my area, Albany, New York, Troy, the tri-state area, they were a group of, I guess, Philly organizers actually that moved to Troy, fundraised a lot of money from tech bros, basically to do anti-capitalist stuff. But they had interpersonal issues. And this happened in BLM groups. This is after the first rendition of BLM, not from last year. And they fell apart because, some of them date, and then 2 people date, 2 people break up, and then the group of 10 or dozen they split in half based on who they are supporting in the breakup, as if breakups can't happen and everyone can still actually be friends, but who caused the breakup or why? And of course, as an aromantic, I think it's all bullshit and hate seeing that happen. And it hasn't happened to me, but I've been in part of it, but mostly because it's, I don't know, more professional, more let's just kind of do our thing. And it's not a tight-knit family, though. So you kind of give that up. There's an air of bureaucracy. So I'll leave it at that.
Can I go next?
Yeah.
Okay. So, I said that and then I was putting ice in my freezer. So the thing that really stands out for me the most, so I'm a pre-law student, right? And I was a policy debater in high school. I've always been very academic. I've always been very theory inclined. So, I was a big reader, very academic. And I think that there is a language barrier and gap that creates conflict. So there's times where we all agree with each other, but we just aren't using accessible language. So accessibility causes a lot of unintentional infighting within the left. So we can all be saying the same things and coming to the same conclusions, but we're not understanding it in the same way, comprehending it in the same way, and we're not making an effort to do that, right? So, and this looks so many different ways. Where are the interpreters, right? We're on a panel right now. Where's the subtitles? Where's the interpreter? That's a huge group of people that are not included in this conversation now, right? So we have to think about who is not a part of the conversation. How do we bring those people into conversation? And then how do we speak to those people? And what language do we use? Another example of that is the generational stuff that goes on. Like, we have these micro trends, like really quick, fast-paced moving trends that happen with the internet and like having access to technology. And I feel like some of the elders who've been organizing for a really long time, who deserve to be treated with a certain level of respect and understanding, are just immediately not being listened to because they don't know the language and they're not using the proper terminology. We're not giving them the space to learn. We're not, calling people in to have conversation about, hey, this is why that language is harmful, or this is what that terminology means now, right? And so that's one thing that I notice a lot is there's this huge generational divide. And then also the intersection of disability and the left is like really lacking. I'm a disabled person. I'm neurodivergent. I have a lot of different intersections. And something that I have noticed is the people that we're leaving out of conversations are the people who are having conversations amongst themselves. And to be honest with you, any type of leftist infighting that I've experienced has been miscommunication, or, you know, this kind of like interpersonal stuff that we touched on earlier.
Whoa.
But I really think we need to start thinking about accessibility in the terms of everything. These panels we do, you know, I host a support group. I'm a peer counselor, and we have an interpreter, right? Like, we had to budget for that, but a budget is a moral document too, right? So we exist under capitalism. We exist under these systems of oppression, but we have responsibility to create an equitable conversation. So there's so many people who are automatically not a part of the conversation because they don't want to have to advocate for themselves over and over again, right? Like, they don't want to have to feel like they have to learn all this new language. It's very intimidating is what I'm getting at. So what I really think that we should be doing more of is not like dumbing down the concepts, but figuring out an accessible way to communicate effectively. Emotional intelligence, right? Like, really thinking about, you know, we're on the same team. And I think that that's what I notice the most is just like, we forget we're on the same team. We exclude people without meaning to. And through those exclusions creates conflict. And yeah, I guess that's my bit.
Yeah, that's a good perspective.
Awesome.
I didn't think about.
Most definitely. Do you mind if I hop in and kind of build off that?
Yeah. I mean, no, I don't mind, but yeah, I mean, do that. Do your thing.
I got you. Yeah, no, that's a big issue I actually had when I first started getting more involved with leftist causes, was that a lot of it wasn't acceptable or not accessible. I have ADHD and I have dyslexia, and just, you know, I have a big issue with like trying to like process thoughts all at once. And when I first like started coming into leftist spaces, there were a lot of people who were just using like purely academic language, or they're like, oh, well, you have to read this much of Marx or this much. And to me, that's just like, don't get me wrong, I love reading, but at the same time, when I'm like, okay, but what about this particular situation? What am I, you know, for example, one of the big issues is, as you can see, I have the good old anarchist A. I'm part of the anarchist community. And one of the big issues I have is that a lot of anarchists just fucking hate communists. And we pretty much want the same thing. There's just like minor differences in there. Like, one of my good friends is YouTuber Luna Oi. So she's obviously like a dyed-in-the-wool red communist. But we all, when I talk to her, we have the same end goal. We have the same end goal of ending capitalism, creating a stateless society, you know, ending unjust hierarchies, and creating a more equitable world. But for some reason, because she uses the term communist, because she, you know, is a follower of the Marxist-Leninist Ho Chi Minh, you know, viewpoint, it's like we don't look at the similarities, and we just look at, oh, well, you believe in, you know, bread lines and gulags and shit like that. It's like, no, we understand, like, we understand that there are issues in the past, but her whole thing is she's like a part of a coalition that's trying to help figure out ways to end that. And I mean, you know, don't get me wrong, I have my issues with like anything that involves some sort of centralized government, which is why I don't consider myself a communist. I'm more for like pure democracy. But we can get to that point once we get past the past the capitalist stage. You know, we can argue all day long right now whether or not communism, anarchists, SOCDEMs, you know, if that's the best way to do it. But you know, if it's not accessible to people who are either just coming in or who have disabilities or who, you know, might not even quite understand what to start with. And if we don't just get past our minor differences and go towards the same goal, yeah, it's insane how much we argue over the minor things, basically, is what I'm saying. And how, as, you know, a community, we're people who say, oh, we are welcoming, tolerant, but we are so intolerant of anyone wanting to learn.
That's good. And I say this quite a bit, where, because I've had personal conflicts with people that are just different on the how far left they are. I'm not as far left as a lot of the people that I consider allies, right? And I'm gonna be open, mask off, I'm a SOCDEM, but we're so far from like being at a SOCDEM territory where like we are all on the same bus, the same darn bus. I can say darn, right? On the same darn bus. When we get to my bus stop, I'll get off of the SOCDEM part. You guys can head as far left on that bus as you want. But I don't know if we're gonna get off that bus in our lifetimes. I just don't know. I'm not confident in that. So I'm getting stuck in the weeds of, oh, we're in the same bus. We have different ideologies.
Are we even on the bus?
Hopefully we're on the bus. I don't like that question, because that's a painful question to ask. Like I hope we are.
There's this comic. I mean, it's just like a one-picture political cartoon where you have some people on a carousel and you have a bus called Revolution, and basically it says like leaves when full, and then there's this carousel and everybody's on the carousel, and then people are like, why on this bus? You're not moving anywhere. At least we're going somewhere. Yeah. And then the carousel has reform.
Oh no.
Yep.
I understand. You explained that comic pretty well. Like I visualized it right there. Dang.
Thank you.
Dang.
If you could give me that, if you could pull that up and send that in the Discord, I would love to see that.
I'll give it a shot.
I think that we have to deconstruct and decolonize, personally. Talk to the indigenous people. You know, we're sitting here talking about structures that we created not that long ago. Like, if you think about it, like, all of these terminologies and things, like, last 200 years, maybe, I mean, I'm, you know what, I'm not a historian, but I'm just saying, like, we did exist as humans in a much healthier way before, and, you know, we did a genocide. We did the genocide stuff and imperialism and things like that. And
multiple genocide.
Yeah, we did a little genocide on the side. And a lot and a bunch and a ton of times. And I think that what we can learn from that is like, hey, like, what are the indigenous people focusing on right now? What can we do to decolonize our conversations surrounding the issues that matter for our survival? And, you know, right now, that's what my focus has been, is following indigenous content creators, listening to what they're saying. Because the thing is, it's not like these concepts are new. Like, mutual aid is an indigenous practice. Community care, collective care, that's an indigenous practice. Like, we're going back to what was torn apart, right? So that's what I feel like we need to remember, is like, we have all these conversations about things that were created by an imperialistic society, when we do have a wealth of knowledge, indigenous individuals who still are living right now, talking to us about what is the most imperative things to be focusing on. And right now that is line 3 from what I have been seeing with the Indigenous content creators that I follow. And so I think like if we are really going to get somewhere in our lifetimes, which I think we can do, Taj, we have to be constantly deconstructing, decolonizing, and centering Indigenous voices, because this all of the options that we have right now, I don't know, it can be really intimidating, but just think about where we were 2 years ago, you know? Like, that's what I like to think about, is just like where we were 2 years ago compared to now. Even like, I think about a lot of my experiences organizing, trying to run a mutual aid collective before the pandemic happened, and nobody knowing like what the fuck I meant by mutual aid, right?
True.
Like, and so like it's just, and the thing is, I didn't come up with mutual aid. It's an Indigenous practice I learned about, right? And like there's an author who's cited quite a bit, Dean Spade. He wrote a book about mutual aid and he gets cited a lot. But like the truth of the matter is that this is from oral histories of Indigenous people. And so we have that existing right now, and they're so desperately wanting to have conversations with us, but the left is not centering that. And I think that is a huge problem.
Yeah.
For all of us.
That Radhom, are you back? Oh, damn it! Can you guys hear him?
No.
Damn.
I can't hear a word Radhom's saying.
Maybe you could type
man,
it.
this is heartbreaking because I really like Radhom and like
You could type it and we could read it.
that works too.
Read it out
Radhom, can you hear us? Do you want to type it, man?
as if you were mute.
See if we all knew sign language. Just saying.
Actually, I did want to ask.
So many skills to learn.
BabyGrandma, when you said you hired an interpreter, I'm actually curious where you go to do that. Because like I genuinely have no idea.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple of different routes that you can go. I'm in community with a lot of deaf and hard of hearing individuals, so it's easy for me to just kind of post on Facebook and be like, hey, who's willing to interpret? But there are programs, and you can look up, there's discounted and sometimes even free programs that provide interpreters. So you would just like type in your city,
Hello.
low cost interpreter, and there's different programs in different areas. Here in Philly, we have
Testing.
I don't want
1,
to
2, 3.
Hi, yeah, we can hear you now.
We can hear you, Rad.
So here in Philly, we have a
Hey,
lot of resources,
Uh,
but you can just Google your area and then free or low cost interpreters. For my interpreter, it's actually somebody that me and my co-founder, we are in community with,
Now,
and so we're doing a trade.
Right.
But there's plenty of options out there. There's grants for people to get interpreters.
okay, they're back.
One second, Rad. 1 second.
Lots of options.
Am I audible?
You're
Yeah.
audible. You're audible.
Thank fuck. Okay, thank you for dealing with that.
Go before you clip away.
No, please finish up your thought. I think I've got it under wraps now.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah. So interpreters are out there. You just got to look for them. And also, valuing I just think that, a budget really is a moral document. And if we're not taking into account captions, interpreting, even like, the different, like, talk to people who are actually deaf and hard of hearing and ask them, like, I'm not even the best person to ask is really what I'm getting at. So, you have to be in community with all types of different people. If we really want an equitable community or collective or movement, whatever you want to call it, then you have to be in community with these people, and then that's how you make the connections, right? So yeah.
Thank you.
I want to jump in. It's why I like the Greens, because there's a disability caucus that their job is literally to bring up these issues all the time. The other thing that comes to mind is like in centering Indigenous voices. It's why the left, and generally speaking, including when the Greens were formed, with 70s, 80s, it's why the left went anti-nuclear, not only in weapons but in power. In centering Indigenous voices, it became clear that even nuclear power was a albatross. And to see technocrats / whatever you want to call them, kind of online lefties talk of it, like literally bash other lefties because they're not nuclear supporters, because they point out that it's still a corporate industry and they do all the bad shit that corporate America does. And even though, and if say New York, when we're closing our nuclear plants, yes, we're burning more gas now, but that's not the left's prerogative. That's Andy's prerogative in not building the offshore wind that we've been pushing for since 2010.
Okay.
So I have a question.
Can we get Radhom back in here real quick?
Vocals. Hi, I'm going to do my actual introduction.
Yeah, go for it,
That
Rad.
fucked out. Hi, I'm Radhom. I am an Australian lefty Twitch streamer. I have a long history as a circus performer, and I paint miniatures while covering various political videos. Unlike some of the people here, I am not an actual organizer. I have not run for political office. I'm just a political nerd and a terminally online person. So please use that as the filter to understand my input into this discussion. Now that introduction's out of the way, just sharing a couple little anecdotes about leftist infighting. So, as I said, I'm quite a terminally online person. I enjoy spending time in various different kinds of online spaces, some based around the hobbies I enjoy, some just based around politics. So this is where I witness and experience most of my leftist infighting. A lot of it does seem to come from, as has been touched upon already in the panel, this friction between people on the authoritarian left and people on the libertarian left. So your hardline Marxist-Leninists with your passionate anarchists. Now, there is some degree of reaching across the aisle. I seem to see more reaching across the aisle from the anarchist side of things than from the authoritarian side of things. I do wonder if this is because authoritarianism promotes groupthink and sticking to the party line, but me, as someone who is somewhat anarchist, may just be biased around this. I have seen quite a toxic leveraging of no leftist infighting rules in online leftist spaces. So these tend to be spaces that are being moderated by people on the auth left. They will have a rule that states no leftist infighting, and it will be A, unequally implied. So it is applied more to restrict people that they don't like, which is a real problem. And B, disagreement is seen as infighting. So if someone says, hang on, Stalin did bad things, they will point to rule 3, no leftist infighting, and if you keep on saying that maybe the Holodomor wasn't great, they fucking boot you. And thus the rule, no leftist infighting, becomes a way to enforce their own hegemony.
That is a good nuanced point.
Are these are these groups for like ML discussions / are these ML groups, or are they discussion groups?
These are groups that are billed as being general leftist groups, but what usually happens, so a lot of ML groups have this idea of entryism that they pursue.
I know, just clarifying.
Yeah, so they're general discussion groups, but they tend to end up with a couple of MLs on the moderation team, who then get more and more of those in and edge out anyone who isn't of that ideology. I have met some genuinely good and honest MLs and quote-unquote tankies online. I'm not painting this with a complete brush here. Speaking of brushes, I am painting miniatures while we're having this discussion. But yeah, and on the more real world side of things, what I've seen tends to be, it was noted before that there's usually an interpersonal aspect. I've seen that happen. There's also, so we have a group here in Australia called SALT, the Socialist Alternative. SALT are notorious in Australia for showing up to other protest movements and trying to co-opt them to just being about them and their organization.
Oh, I hate that.
That tends to cause a lot of friction between different leftist groups.
Yeah, that boils my
someone
blood.
in my chat has just said "fuck SALT," so it's a common experience. And then we've got stuff around, I guess what I'd say is political groupthink. So here in Australia, down in Melbourne, there were two different socialist parties that formed together into, I think, the Victorian Socialist Party, so that they could cover more ground. Then there were some sexual harassment allegations around the new leader of the party, who had been the leader of one of the old groups. The members of the old group closed rank around him, and all of the new people and all of the people who were in the previous group that had joined up with them just went, nope, fuck this, I'm out. Left, understandably, and now Victoria has been left with one very weak socialist party instead of two reasonably weak socialist parties. So that's infighting, yes, technically infighting, but also infighting that came because the party closed ranks around a toxic person that they should have just booted because they relied on that person's cult of personality.
That kind of leads me into another line that I wanted to. I'm sorry, Dan P. I think this might coincide with what you're about to say. Just like my intuition is telling me, is how wide or narrow is the window of beliefs that you're willing to work with, and why? Is that kind of related to what you were saying, Dan?
Actually, no. I was going to segue into kind of my, I guess, prepared notes.
Oh yeah, dude.
So like, as leftists, we're really concerned about the means of production, of course, the means of life. But when it comes to questions of power or politics, there's a kind of a means of governance that we are completely missing. Now, in some organizations, this exists in some form, like maybe using Robert's rules. But for the most part, we have been completely neglected in any kind of education, political education, on governance. And this includes courts, right? As anarchists, and I'm speaking broadly, speaking of anarchists, but even MLs too, we don't want to use capitalist courts. We don't want to use the man's courts. But that means we really need our own. And the reason why a lot of these things happen and why it becomes mob justice or whatever is because there's a lack of what's called accountability structures and such. So solution-based local food not bombs that I was in, whatever. I'm not the captain anymore, but whatever. We formed a safe space committee, which would be not the enforcer, but when someone violates the rules of safe space,
an arbitrator.
Right. But like they would make guidelines for what makes a safe space in the I call it the info shop we were using for our meals. And if someone broke them, the Safe Space Committee would assess and this goes to any kind of someone, say, we even had a tip line of sorts. You can call anonymously and just say, this person harassed me. You don't have to give a name so much, but then the committee would then have the authority to investigate, determine what happened or didn't happen, and say, okay, and do some restorative justice in that, okay, you're going to do some feminist readings and come back with maybe just like what you learned a week or two later. And in the case of the person who did the harassing, was making the some of the meal preppers creeped out, when he came back and said like, oh, I didn't do the readings, didn't learn anything, don't want to, I didn't do anything wrong. Fine, you're banned from the cooking now. And the serving too, but you didn't come to the serving. So there's an example, and a lot of groups, this includes the Green Party too. We do our best to arbitrate when there's a conflict, but a lot of these groups don't even try to have such a mechanism. And if there is, then it may be a committee of people who aren't trusted, because maybe they're not elected, or I don't know who these people are doing the investigating. Maybe they're friends with the accused. You know, it needs to be a party of people who are neutral, and maybe they need to be applied ad hoc. It's kind of anecdotal,
that's
but
the kind of measure that you can only really have once a group or organization reaches a certain size. So, you know, if your mutual aid collective is like 10 people who are working together to get some food to the local homeless, then you can't really have an independent accountability body. But if you've got 50 to 100 people, suddenly that becomes much more
viable.
Viable thing to have. Which I think it is a really cool and important set of ideas, especially when we get to official levels of organizing, either politically or with social assistance organization groups. Having those accountability structures baked in on an institutional level, I think at the very least can, you know, help people feel more safe that if there is something that goes wrong, like happened in Melbourne, or might happen around, say, disability issues or something, then there is a method of recourse that can be sought without that person having to commit social suicide just to be heard.
So, can I add to this? Because it has brought up two questions for me. My first question is these groups, you keep bringing up these caucuses, the disability caucus, etc. Are these groups being paid? And if not, then, like, because I think this is something that I feel like comes up for me a lot, is like in the corporate world, which I also have a little bit of experience with somehow. Don't tell them that I'm here, haha. But there's something called diversity, equity, and inclusion, and I feel like we can really learn from that as organizers. There's a whole sect of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and what happens is there is like they do equity audits, but they do it in a very distinctive and like structured and organized way, and like for corporate America, their end goal is like, you know, let's get good PR, but we can learn from those structures and utilize them in leftist spaces. So my biggest thing is, if there's a disability caucus that is, once again, unpaid labor, you're going to lose out on the most important voices, because it's a privilege to be able to give your time for free in the systems and structures that we exist under right now. So if you're not paying those people, then your accountability structure already is flawed, in my opinion. But then again, like, there comes in, you also mentioned there's like this disconnect between the legal system and organizing, which, hey, I'm a pre-law student. I literally argue with people about this a lot, because I think that, yes, I agree, I'm an abolitionist. I think all of it should go away. But at the same time, it is here right now, and there's actually really effective ways that we can leverage our rights that we have, that we're purposefully not being told about, right? So, for example, I was able to get settlement checks for, I don't know, 20 plus cosmetologists. I'm not an attorney. I don't do any type of attorney type of
sorry,
work.
Forgive my ignorance. What's a cosmetologist?
Oh, hair, skin, and nails. I went to beauty school. So I think that we have to start thinking outside of the box about what labor we pay for, right? And if we don't pay for that labor, who is being excluded? And that is so important too. And if we're asking for labor from disabled people who already have limited capacity under this the structures that we exist in. So I am a disabled working class person without parents, right? So a lot of these organizations that ask me to pay dues automatically can't do it. These organizations that expect me to be able to get to the meetings, well, I don't have a car and I don't know how to drive and I don't have money for the transportation, right? So it is a privilege to be able to be in these spaces. And then it's people with that certain amount of privilege who are trying to create accountability, when really the people who need to be in conversation about accountability are the people who don't have the time to dedicate to an accountability process without being paid for it. So I think that that's really what I'm trying to get at, is like, if people are not being paid for this labor, for this education, then you're going to get shitty education. You know, you're going to get a shitty accountability.
Yeah.
And then, you know, people want to talk about, like, you know, I don't know, the argument that comes up the most for me when I bring up this point of just like, we cannot continue to burn ourselves out. And if we're not paying for labor, for things like community care, accountability, structures of accountability and education, then we're gonna get shitty accountability, structures of accountability and education.
Damn.
Can I respond?
So this is like accessibility equals power. I never really thought about it that way.
Oh, certainly. So
yeah, I definitely am interested in a response if Taj is cool with that.
Okay. So first off, there are very few. I think we maybe have the Green Party, and we're a national party with like 250,000 registered people anyway. We have 2 paid staffers. And it's probably the same could be said of any organization, including
and
DSA.
Problem. In my opinion.
Of course, you're right. Now let me. And of course, yeah, it's a problem with all organizations. Now there's 2 kind of responses. You either become a nonprofit and accept, like say the radio station I'm in, where we accept grants from health insurance companies and any other type of place we can get it, because money freaking matters, especially if you got to pay rent. And of course, even my nonprofits, a lot of people are also still unpaid. It's completely volunteer. But again, that's a freaking problem. No one's actually responsible even for picking up the trash. And we have to negotiate amongst ourselves who's going to do these chores, whatever. And then it's the person who's maybe most able-bodied. It's me, which, okay. But otherwise, when we're talking about actual like organizing and facilitation work and teaching work, which my private shame is I'd like to be teaching more people how to facilitate and run meetings, and because those are the means of governance that a lot of people are missing. Even on Twitch, on most of these panel discussions, not you, Taj, but well, where's the stack taking? Where's the time limits? Where's the whatever? This is more freeform, and we're only 5 people, 6.
Yeah.
So the other side of it is to have due-paying members like a union does, which the Green Party is attempting to have a long time now, going from the ups and downs of fundraising, getting some big ticket donors or something like that, or only fundraising when we have a presidential candidate, or we're only able to fundraise. But that's terrible for local organizing. It means state chapters have nothing. But we've slowly been switching to due-paying membership, which, yes, is for the working poor, makes it inaccessible. But of course, we wouldn't really require it. We don't require the dues to participate. It's something that we want to propagate so we can actually pay ourselves.
Right.
And we'll never be able to in organizations that can fight properly until we do it, which is why I really love Howie Hawkins, because this is something he's been chiming about for since 06, I think, or especially 2010. And
so this seems like a bit of a chicken and the egg situation.
Yeah.
So ideally we want to be paying these people, but also in order to get organizations to the size and with enough people that the organizations have enough money to pay for these services to make them quality, the organizations have to rely on a fair bit of volunteer labor.
I think also something that could be added is like financial transparency. We're taught to hide our access to resources and our financial capabilities. But if we are to be truly mutual aid, which is my focus, right? I run a mutual aid collective. It's who can give, and giving equitably based upon what you have. Why don't we create financial transparency sheets, right? And then hold ourselves accountable to what we do have access to. And for a lot of people, that makes them uncomfortable, but I think it's absolutely important, because otherwise, you know, like so the model that my collective is under is like nobody gets paid, but sometimes we do like a mutual aid fund and get money, collect from the community, fundraising, yada yada. That was not sustainable. I don't recommend it. And I do think that a workers-owned co-op with, like, I don't know, like there's so many different options, but I think it starts with financial transparency. Because if we're not being truthful with each other about what access we have to finances and resources, then there's no way for us to have an equitable entrance into organizing. Right? So if we start having these conversations about, hey, I have this inheritance, I have, you know, and these are things that we're literally taught not to do. We're taught to not talk about money, right? But like, what if we did? What if we did? And then everybody gave what they could based on this financial transparency. And then that could create a sliding scale dues that start at zero, right? Depending on your situation. And a group that I organized with that I won't name because I'm not an official member anymore, we did a financial transparency sheet in the beginning of our vetting process. Oh. And then when you came in, based on the financial transparency, then you had a certain accountability to supporting either with time or with, you know, like, hey, I have a car. It's not just money. This is for the resources.
I see. This is for the members. You're not talking about transparency for the org, which of course should exist, but you're talking about for each of the members.
For the members, not for everyone, not for everybody involved, but like for the
kind of like an income tax sheet.
How did that kind of play out? It
played out really well. This organization's doing really phenomenal work. I still do auxiliary work with them. I'm affiliated, but I don't have permission to like say their name, so I don't want to.
Yeah, you don't have to say the name.
Yeah, it actually ended up working out really well. In the beginning, it was super uncomfortable, especially when I was looking at everyone else's, and I was like, oh shit. I'm really down
looking at the capitalist power levels.
People really have this much money? Fuck! I was so confused. Like, I was like, whoa! I've been talking myself into thinking that other people were in similar situations than me, and that is just not true. You find out about inheritance, access to transportation and cars. We have to give each other the trust of knowing this information so that we can effectively, so that, you know, the poorest among us are not the ones constantly donating into the mutual aid fund, right? We can't have,
but also so that you collectively know what kind of resources, and like not just monetary resources, but resources based around time, transport, etc. you can pull together from where in order to make the maximum impact. So It's not just a mutual accountability thing. It's something that allows you to make effective tactical decisions as an organization.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm gonna hop in real quick. I know Frakkle wants to say something, but like that's kind of where I stand, because we all, like for me, I work 2 jobs and I pretty much had to take today off just so we can do this panel.
Damn.
But I'm just like,
well, thank you for making that
dedication.
Sacrifice.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. I love these kind of discussions. So, but yeah, like, and on top of that, even still with my 2 jobs, I have a lot of bills to pay. So like whenever I'm not part of any organization right now. I'm looking at ones we have in town, seeing if there's something viable here. And if not, I plan on starting one. But it's like, that's something that I never even thought about, a financial transparency sheet. That would help out a lot with any sort of organization we have in town. All right. Frakkle, you've been very patient. I'm going to kind of hope everyone gives you a chance to talk.
Okay, so this is where I'm going to hopefully not ruffle too many feathers, but spout a few of the things that I've kind of been rolling around in my head. Okay, so first of all, back a few topics on not just accessibility, but also kind of touching on briefly the subject that John brought up a little bit was the idea of who all is actually being included in conversations just based on like ideology, basically. And one of the things that I think the left is really, really bad at is actually taking the time to reach liberals. And I know, pain in the ass, but
Liberals.
But at the end of the day,
I'm technically a liberal, actually.
Libtards.
Yeah, at the end of the day, at least here in America, they still are a majority of the electorate. And what is a liberal but someone who's just not really educated on what all is going on? Usually it's an apolitical person that has general sympathies towards fairness. But we do a really poor job of actually reaching them. There's this kind of attitude of just being dismissive and often hostile and basically bounces them off without ever learning anything. And the part of the reason I bring that up is part of that gets into why it is so difficult to not just to get, other power structures even conceived of besides are we going Republican or Democrat, which is kind of the sum total of most people's engagement in the civic system at all. There is a major problem with political literacy as a whole, which it limits the ability of getting things like ranked choice voting, which would open up the floodgates for alternative parties.
As an Australian, I can highly fucking recommend ranked choice voting. It's goddamn amazing. Also, in a little bit, I want to tell you all about the single greatest democratic innovation that Australia has brought to bear, which I think I've talked to Frakkle about before.
Yes, you did.
We'll
and I look forward to you plugging it again because it is a fantastic idea. That also goes to a large extent the court system as well. So again, that lack of political literacy, and this actually extends not just to liberals, but many leftists. A lot of leftists, at least that I witness, get so deeply entrenched in the theory of their end game that they lose track of what the hell actually functions right now that effective change could be made today. And I get it. You do want to have some picture of what your destination is, but you want that so that you can identify steps you can take towards it. And I think that gets lost a lot of times. Like with how the court system operates, there's a lot that can be done by getting into positions of local power, city council positions, mayoral positions, county commissioner positions, etc. You can actually affect a lot of change in how a localized criminal justice system happens. If you get someone who is, say, sympathetic to abolitionist thinking into a sheriff position, they can do a lot to change how a police department functions, up to and including just hamstringing the whole thing towards a restorative justice type model. And I do worry that a lot of that gets kind of forgotten. Like, obviously, trying to overturn the system, it seems very contradictory to leverage the system, but unless you're actually going to go out there shooting, like, that's technically the cleanest way to do it, is find ways to smuggle those ideas into positions of power where those changes can be made. So anyway, I've kind of rambled on a few different things there. Sorry.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Okay, buddy.
A lot of folks on the left have like an immediate utopia or bust position, which really isn't helpful. Sorry, I went and interrupted you there, BabyGrandma. Would you like to continue?
No, I mean, I just wanted to add, like, real quick thing. Working with the IWW, who's extremely direct action, and being a pre-law student, has been extremely eye-opening to what you were talking about. Like, misclassification, for example, is something that has probably happened to everybody on this call in the past 7 years. And what a lot of you don't know is there's a 7-year statute of limitations, and you can get up to 200% liquidated damages depending on the state you're in. That's a lot of money. Okay. And I want people to know that, but people are so shut out to it. When I was, I'm currently organizing a union for a small tech nonprofit, and we're working with the IWW. And when I start talking about my legal aspect of it, immediate shut off. Oh, that's going to take too long. Nobody wants to play the long game. But we have to sometimes. We have to look at the micro and the the many steps of the bigger goal, like a SMART goal. And I think, if for example, I don't think that a lot of union organizers understand how many legal advocates. I'm a legal advocate currently. I've helped a lot of people get settlement checks. I'm not an attorney. It was never legal advice, for the record. I still don't give legal advice. That's not what I do. I'm not an attorney. But somehow I've been able to educate people in a way where magically they're getting money, right? And there's so many different things like that. We're not taught about proper tax classification. And so a lot of us end up being misclassified. We don't understand the statute of limitations. We don't understand the places we can report to. The Department of Labor, the IRS. The IRS is actually incentivized in cases of misclassification, because guess who wants their money? The IRS. They're not a big fan of tax fraud. It doesn't matter if a big company's doing it. In fact, they're more incentivized if a big company's, stealing money from them. So that's why I want people to fucking listen to me sometimes when it comes to hey, I know, I get it. These powers that be, right? They fucking suck. But at the same time, we do have rights. Those posters in the break room with the tiny, tiny little fucking print. Bring the fucking microscope out. I've done this several times in work environments. I've said, "Hey y'all, have you read the poster in the break room?" Because it's there. It legally has to be there, and it's there for a reason, right? And so I don't know. I just really wanted to add that piece. If people don't understand misclassification, please look it up. If you are in New Jersey, you are in luck. If you're in California, you're super in luck.
What about Florida?
If that ever happened to you?
All right, that was
So I've got a quick general question for anyone who's been involved in organizing IRL groups. So I know that's BabyGrandma and Dan P. It may apply to some others as well. Are there any tactics or ways of organizing the social spaces in the groups that you've found that have either things that have made leftist infighting worse, or things that have made it less likely, or that have helped you to resolve not just disagreements inside the group, but specifically this problem of leftist infighting, where the disagreements are arising because of the friction from the mismatch in left-leaning ideological specifics.
So
I mean,
I'll go since Grandma.
Can you reframe that one more time?
Last, if that's okay. So I want to hit on a number of points. So I'll definitely answer that question first. First, I mentioned facilitation because I think that's usually the thing that's kind of most helpful. Not most, maybe, but it's very, very helpful in stopping splits. For example, our local Food Not Bombs, a split between vegans and non-vegans, or rather, most are vegans, but maybe they're okay with serving or giving away non-vegan dumpster dive stuff, but the other vegans don't want to, and usually having good facilitation where it's like, okay, we're in an impasse, let's actually just step away, take a break, not for 3 hours in one argument like some Bloodsport panels do, but actually have 1 hour breaks, because no one wants to be in a meeting, even if it's entertaining maybe, for more than an hour at a time.
Yeah.
I wanted to hit on so one other tool is to, when you brainstorm a group or any kind of collective action, there's a number of kind of things to work out using consensus. And for this, there are books just literally called Consensus, or a website with their own YouTube channel called Sociocracy. They're a wonderful resource. Otherwise, to set short, medium, and long-term goals. And so that's one frame. Another frame is that many groups many different groups can have the same goals, like end game as you put it, but have different strategies, and that's what they're fighting about. So like, say, DSA National, or maybe any kind of dem entryist, they could be just as anti-capitalist as me, or say a syndicalist, whatever. And we're on the same page as far as being a leftist. But because they need to keep their position and work with Democrats as a Democrat, that rules out any kind of collaboration with independent socialists of any kind. So they could, on one hand, talk like a radical, but then endorse cops on the other.
Ain't that some shit?
So there are these real tensions between enter and outer. You know, and this is over a decade of being an activist, or rather, I came to the Green Party because it was kind of, to me, the middle ground between being independent, direct action oriented, but also at the same time using our system and participating it on our terms as leftists, which doesn't give us too much notoriety, but we do have many victories. We run hundreds of races every year, and we actually win a few dozen. We have 200 elected Greens, and they are mostly local positions. We have 8 state legislators. Keep learning that factoid. And of course we want to expand that. But it's hard to do that when there's, say, the nonprofit industrial complex. So many groups with the same ideology as us, but they are banned from collaborating with us. Sometimes it's more of a kleptocracy thing where someone who's a county employee, and because in Albany, we've had a political machine forever, that they were not allowed to publicly help me, as I ran for county executive.
Yep.
And other things like that. Or let's say, local DSA. Many DSA chapters chose to not endorse anyone in the general election, since many of them, put so much of their time into who to endorse in the Dem primary. And then, so 2 DSA chapters endorsed Harry Hawkins. So many others simply said, we're not endorsing anyone. In fact,
That sounds irresponsible.
Bernie was the last straw. We're not really going to do electoralism.
Wow, that is
anymore.
crazy irresponsible.
But that's not true. Well, then on the other hand, this year, of course, they endorse Dems in primaries that they liked.
Mm-hmm.
So
Their little
kind of
hissy
feels
fit
like
is done.
you could. Okay, I'm not going to frame it like that, of course, because some of them are my friends, and the DSA chapter is currently doing the free store, which is kind of like the mutual aid. It's clothes like Food Not Bombs, but everything else.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I could go on, but did that answer your question for the most part? That spaces
Yes,
work
it
better
did.
when you have good facilitation. Because the reason why post Occupy Wall Street, this is after the encampment was swept by Democratic mayors, was I joined immediately a consensus working group. It was basically me and 8 other people, because one of the things we saw happening was that the General Assembly was really good as a recruitment tool, but as it was run to be amazingly inclusive, really bad at making concrete decisions. And this was sort of on purpose, that there was really bad facilitation. We wanted to study why it was bad and what would be better. And so we kind of came back to the GA like 6 months later with our recommendations, and by this time the amount of people in Zuccotti Park was 100 at a monthly or weekly meeting, and of course it fizzled out because there's just so many provocateurs or people who are just there to hear themselves talk and so on, and we were just some self-appointed working group. So what authority do we have in a crowd of anarchists? But hey, I mean, I didn't even know I was an anarchist before Occupy, and I was like, holy shit, I'm doing direct democracy? Cool.
Yeah.
Can I answer the question too? Because I have like a very structured way that I kind of... So facilitation is really important. Definitely agree with you there. Super, super important. But so is understanding people's capacity before they join the group. And this is what I feel like so many people don't do right. So in my collective, we had, when somebody was interested in joining the collective, there's a conversation. It's a collaborative conversation about, hey, do you want to just be a one-off volunteer? Do you want to just be somebody who donates? Do you want to be somebody who is in decision-making? Do you want to be somebody who's in leadership? And what do all of those different stages look like? Do you want to be a chapter director? That contains all of this type of responsibility. Do you want to be just a collective member, which contained, and we almost created job descriptions, but not actual jobs. And so that people knew what they were coming into before they officially came into it. And I feel like that was imperative, because especially when we're talking about, people who might not have as much time to devote, or even just in these conversations, they're very interpersonal conversations I would have one-on-one with new members who are ready to come into the collective, really finding out what is their objective and making it a collaborative conversation about what can this person provide, right? What is your access? What is your capacity? And then from there, trust is built. And those conversations are not one-time conversations, right? So those conversations happen regularly. Another thing that I really, I'm a peer counselor and I do support groups. And so something that I bring into my organizing work is actually DBT modalities, which is a form of therapy, which sounds kind of strange, but DBT is a form of therapy where it's a skill-based therapy, and there's a lot of interpersonal skill interpersonal skills that are encompassed in DBT. So I use a lot of DBT modalities in my everyday life when I'm engaging with individuals. So there's a lot of de-escalation techniques. One that was mentioned that I think is really powerful is taking space and time. You know, instead of just being reactionary, giving ourselves time to process, right? To really process. Coping ahead if a conversation is going to be really hard and you anticipate that this is going to be a really tough topic. What do we have in place? You know, planning ahead, coping ahead for these situations that we already know are going to be tense. Another thing is just when you're dealing with in-person organizing, I feel like it can be, I haven't had a lot of conflict within my collective, to be honest with you.
Fortunate.
Yeah, I do feel very fortunate, but I feel like it's because I do really well with vetting and I do super well with these check-ins, right? Because there's going to be de facto leaders no matter what. So,
with your vetting process,
yes.
Do you think that it's primarily a matter of expectation setting, primarily a matter of making sure the right people join, or is it more a fusion of the two?
It is totally a fusion. And there's also an education process. So we had an LMS system or a learning maintenance system that helped explain what is mutual aid, what is the difference between what we are doing and what is a nonprofit doing. You know, the basis of like, and even before we would show up to a location. So my organization is called Metamorphosis Collective. We don't gender our clothing. We don't gender our clothing, right? So we need to have a gender neutral changing room. And so we would do trainings with any place that we planned on popping up at. You know, hey, if you don't have a gender neutral training or changing room, then we just can't pop up at that location, right? And so having those conversations and doing the prep work and then the post work too. So it's really, I think it's, for me, the success that I have found with my in-person organizing is really just about being very intentional, being extremely intentional, thoughtful, and planning ahead and then following up. So there's pre-work and there's post-work. So there's pre-work and post-work. And I think that the pre-work and post-work is being left out a lot. You know, there's some people who just want to give you money. And hey, that's fine by me. And you figure that out in a conversation with them, right? And then there's some people who want to help you develop systems and processes. You know, you find that out. And it's really just about, you know, I would let any person in my collective come up with their own title. And, you know, based on, we would, you know, map it out together. And based on that, you know, they've been able to move on in their careers. Like, I can say I've been an executive director for 4 years. I'm 25. Like, are you kidding me? Like, that's gonna really open doors for me, and it has. And you know, my creative director now is a creative director at a real company. So it's like things like that. You know, what are your goals in the future? Can I support
figuring
you
out
in
ways
your
to
goals?
facilitate the other people in the group, making sure that they're getting something out of the involvement so that they have an personal investment and reason to not get into petty squabbles, because everyone there involved collectively wants to get stuff out of what's happening, both from a personal and a moral community perspective.
Yeah.
Yes, the mutual part of mutual aid is left out so often. But what is in it for me is how we exist in this world, because it's how we have to. And in an idealistic utopian society, like, wouldn't have to be that way, but people want to know what's in it for me. And so I provide that to them. And to be honest with you, like, I think that is why the communities and the movements that I start don't just end when I leave, right? Like, I started my at my mutual aid collective in Orlando, Florida, and now I live in Philly, and that chapter is still running. In fact, they have a new project that they're taking on. They're going to try community fridges, right? Like
That's really the dream, isn't it? To make something that lasts for longer than you do.
I
Someone who lives
really,
near
really
Orlando, I might
want that
the contact
to be...
information on that group.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
To know.
metamobileboutique.com. If you're interested in learning more. Metamobileboutique.com. So we are in a very transitional phase right now here in Philly because I'm poor, and so I can't afford the rent at our warehouse space here. But we're kind of we're metamorphosizing. So it's fine. And the thing is too, it's like my expectations when I was 21 and homeless and I started this project, because I didn't have clothes. That was it. I didn't have clothes. And I didn't like the way that it felt just going to a clothing swap with all the fucking clothes on the floor. And are they clean? Are they dirty? I have to run over Stacy, and does this actually fit me? And is this gonna, have rips and tears in it? And now with COVID, health concerns, I switched everything to virtual. I do virtual shopping sessions. I did like QVC style live. It's about the innovation. And the thing is, like, I am really bad about this. I'm the world's worst boss to myself, because I've been doing this for 4 years and, not getting paid. And so that's where the sustainability comes in, is like, rolling with the punches and kind of like, knowing when I have to take a step back. Also knowing when people are overworking themselves and not encouraging that either directly or indirectly.
So I was intending to step back to the question that Taj asked a while ago, but I'm sorry, I need to derail slightly more. You mentioned something that is in my specific wheelhouse. One of the things that I've been pushing for with my channel, one of the reasons that I do what I do with painting miniatures while responding to political videos. I think that in activist circles, there's a lot of burnout that people experience. Leftists are very passionate. It's easy for us to throw our entire existence into trying to make the world better. And the world can be a really harsh place, and it can be very easy to burn out from that. So what I've been doing with my channel and with the Discord community that I'm trying to build is trying to make it kind of a shared progressive hobby space. So to encourage people to engage in their hobbies, passions, and interests for their own mental health reasons. So that at the end of the day, you can clock off, you can get off the internet, disconnect with whatever bullshit arguments are going on, or even just decompress from, having spent a long week helping out at your local soup kitchen. Pick up a book, do some writing, paint a miniature, learn some juggling, edit some video, take some photos of your beautiful houseplants, find hobbies and passions that resonate with you so you can take care of your mental health in your own time and on your own way.
I want to jump in with...
I just, real quick before you jump in, what we model to the people that we are organizing is what will happen. So I was burning myself out over and over and over again and freaking out, and everybody else was doing that too. And I realized what you did, that we needed to have play and rest.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
I wanna.
It's very easy to not incorporate that. So let's let others talk.
So Kayla is amazingly right about everything she's been talking about. I just want to add on some language, vocab like roles, like in terms of like job descriptions and expectations. Like, what are people's roles? Another thing mentioned was the money collecting, and I was in this one little ad hoc cause. It was to basically block a casino from being built in my city, and we knew. And I was basically joining with some suburbanites to do this because the casino would have been between City of Albany and neighbors. We knew we'd only be doing this for a month. So when we did a kind of big public meeting to gather support and get some news coverage for everyone who didn't want this casino, we even had like a speaker. We had someone come up at the end, want to give us like this fat check. And we basically like, we didn't turn it down, but it's like, well, we don't have a bank account to accept this. And the guy was like disgusted with our disorganization. Like, oh, you guys don't know what you're doing. Of course, we all knew what we were doing. We were all seasoned in various ways. But it's just like we knew that in a month, if we were successful, we wouldn't need this. And plus, all of us didn't really need the money because they were like, suburban professionals, and I was kind of practically full-time activist. Now, I don't know what the average age here is, but I'm 32. And in Occupy, this is in 2012.
I'm 33 myself.
Thank you.
I'm 25. Yay.
33, gonna be 34 next month.
Undisclosed.
Happy almost
I'm the oldest
birthday.
one here.
So as one of the 30 somethings, I want to point out. So like so after Occupy, or rather during Occupy, there's a sense of panic, especially when you notice that Greenland has completely melted this year. There's a panic of like, gotta do things now, right? And Kayla pointed out that we're not doing our prep work in organizing, or that it's needed and people need to know what the prep work is. Kind of like how when you're learning how to cook, you kind of need to know how to chop things first, or otherwise you just stare at the ingredients and you're like, I guess I'll just order Fresh Direct. Or you order Fresh Direct because they pre-chop things. And no, what the hell is? Oh yeah, so avoiding burnout. So there's a sense of panic, and so like in the year after leaving college, coming home, college was in New York City. I was getting into some burnout because I was trying to do everything possible, multiple working groups at Occupy Albany, trying to keep things active as people were starting to attrition out and losing interest, going to their own more individualized projects or causes, where Occupy was kind of bringing everybody kind of together for a big jam. But I started getting really upset with a particular activist who, she's like 60 something, so she kind of just needed to she gave me kind of not so much a verbal slap, but I mean a word of encouragement that I was taking too much on myself, putting it on my shoulders. A similar speech that was given to me during college in my thesis year. We didn't qualify for thesis. I'm going to call it thesis year, where I was doing the secular club, I was going to other things, and I was doing an Occupy. And I had all my classes. And basically, I wasn't keeping up with my schoolwork. My thesis was suffering. I was doing half the work of my compatriots. And this is even without doing all-nighters like most architecture students do. And I had a professor just kind of say, like, Dan, you're doing a lot of things that you're passionate about, but you have to drop something. So like having a limit of doing like 2 projects at a time, even though,
and that's
I mean,
tough
if it's
too.
a necessity, now if it's a necessity, like Kayla being homeless, you have to do a lot of everything to get what you need. And that's where we need to put ourselves out there for the struggling, of course. Like,
well, that's what
I
makes me mad is like I was 21 and homeless and I was able to redistribute thousands of dollars worth of clothing, and you want to tell me that people can't help? Like, that's the part that my brain doesn't comprehend, because I'm sorry, but like I was 21 and homeless and I was able to build something, and I want more people to see that, to see themselves in positions of like I don't like the word power, but in positions of abundance, resource, and control. Maybe control's a bad word too. But you know,
another vocab word that's used in our anarchist spaces is underliner. Someone who's responsible for getting something done, but isn't really in a place of power. They're just an underliner, so people just kind of have agreed that, like, so I call myself the serving captain. I was an underliner for the serving to make sure that things were set up. I was responsible to go and open the space up and so on. Being in a management committee, you know, underlining things, because, you know, it's like adhocracy, you know, where leadership, everyone can be a leader for something some of the time. And learning how to be a leader and be leaderful is another buzzword from Occupy, is something you learn when you're in a General Assembly and everybody has, and in good facilitation, everyone actually has an equal say, or as much as a say they want, and everyone can actually feel like a leader because they are, and there isn't a hierarchy of voices or whatever. But when the decision is consensus upon, then there's a unity of action in the vanguard, in a sense. But one thing that I want to point out seriously is one observation I came to in one of my episodes this year, as I was talking about strategies and other things, or it was left-wing culture war, I call it, between ML groups and anarchist groups, especially since the pandemic started, but it kind of existed beforehand as well, that despite all the differences in ideology, but maybe not goals or strategies, they're all essentially doing the same thing, which is mutual aid, kind of prefigurative politics, which is where, you know, you practice what you want to actually happen. We want a worker economy, then we need to be starting co-ops, for example, but also having communistic goals, at least if there's radical or revolutionary politics. So these are all independent lefties I'm talking about.
This goes back to the bus analogy, or metaphor rather, where we're all on the same bus. We just have to different stops. Of course, we have to recognize that sometimes. Just pull back and recognize, even if we don't necessarily like the passengers that we're on the bus with.
I think Mayhem wanted to break in earlier.
Yeah, just a little bit. I wanted to point out too, like some of the things I've learned from local anarchist groups too, is that not every project has to be like 100% let's go. Like one of the big things is too, like, you know, sometimes just having a book club, or, you know, doing a gardening project or things like that, things that are fun, things that are, you know, still helping, but they're more relaxed. They're more like, okay, we can discuss a book, or we can, you know, go and make this neighborhood look better, or, you know, hey,
building
let's go.
Community and connections both within the left and within our broader communities around us.
Exactly. You know, you're doing that, and it's not work. It's just, you're still doing something, but you're doing it in a way that makes you feel, okay, I'm not burnt out. I'm not constantly going 100%. Burnout is one of the biggest causes of fighting, I think. And if we can all just sit there and be like, oh, hey, you know, this month we've done this action, and this action. Let's go read a book for a little bit, or let's go to the park, pick up some trash, and maybe then go and do some gardening. It's still acting, it's still work, but it's more of a laid back. You don't have to constantly be thinking about how trash fire the world is.
There's also a social pragmatic purpose behind that, and this is something that Radhom and I touched on in our conversation recently. If you, with your group that you're working with, have some common ground interests beyond your activism, you are more likely to see them as like friends and have that camaraderie. Whereas if the only thing you know about them is their politics and the work that they're doing, then that is the sole criteria you will judge them on. Like, I think that's a cause of a lot of leftist infighting, is literally the only thing that people know about each other is their political ideation. And you're a lot more forgiving about and flexible about political ideation of people that you are personally close to, that you're friends with, and having shared hobbies, you know, doing community gardening, book club stuff, etc., builds that kinship, builds that relationship, and allows a lot more understanding, as well as a lot more willingness to listen and learn from one another, I think.
That makes a lot of sense. Like looking back in life, and I'm thinking of like who I knocked heads with the most. It's not someone that I've had a meal with. It's usually someone that I barely know, or maybe only in like a signal chat, or maybe at an action or something. And that's who I'm more likely to have beef with.
Yeah,
exactly. Because you have no skin in the game on that person.
That's why
Makes a lot of sense.
Right. This is a tactic that's used by de-radicalization people to kind of move people away from positions of bigotry as well. So the more you get to know people within a certain group and get to realize that they are just people just like you, the more likely you are to be able to build empathy with them. So the more we get to know and get along with different kinds of leftists, the more likely we are to be able to just get along with each other when it counts. And I think that, so we live, like a lot of the world that we live in at the moment is mediated through online spaces, and online spaces have a habit of forming echo chambers. Some of this is a function of just forming safe spaces, so making sure that people within those spaces can feel that they are safe and welcome there. That necessitates the exclusion of some other kinds of people and some other kinds of ideas. But this can create a situation where we become more and more locked off and more insular as well. So with our online spaces, I do wonder if we need to start having designated kind of community spaces which follow these safe, like more of these safe space restrictions, and designated activism spaces where we need to accept that we might be interacting with people who do have a bit of a different outlook, but we're all here for a specific purpose with a specific goal. And yeah, the few times I've seen people try to combine those two functions, it hasn't worked.
Similar to meetings, there should be business meetings and social meetings.
Yeah.
And so a lot of Occupy, but of course it can happen anywhere, where you combine both, or because you don't have a social meeting, or meetup, or whatever, people socialize and spend half or most of the time at the meeting socializing, catching up, instead of actually talking about the business or the work or the chores that need to be done. And thinking of things like as chores, and abolishing work, it's more like you make everything into a chore, something that needs to be done, but something that isn't really a big deal when you're doing it.
I think it's all about the framing. I like to think about the framing of like I'll do right now, I am doing all my work remote. So I found all the parks that have Wi-Fi and outlets, right? And so I have picnic every day, and that's how I work, right? It's about the framing and the context. And also with this group that I'm organizing, I was like, maybe we could have a picnic. And guess what? It was great. People brought food. We got to talk about, things outside of just like, we're blowing bubbles. Somebody brought a hammock. It was awesome. And I wish that there was more of that going on. And I also am creating, I'm the co-founder of a mental health resource for adults online called Lavender Space, and that is also a radical space for people to receive community care and support, a safer space like what was just being talked about. We have an online community that's growing, and we also have right now a autistic adult support group and a body doubling group that helps with task inertia for people with neurodivergence, so that we can get our things done together and in community. It's all about being in community. It's not just, these are the people that I organize with. The people I organize with are family at this point. Like,
damn.
I'm in community with them. Also, I really have to pee.
Yeah, my cat has been like,
Yeah,
not my cat.
We have been going for like 2.5 hours so far.
I didn't mean for it to go this long, but this is getting
breaks.
good. Like, it's where I hope you guys are all. I hope this is mutual for everybody, but this has been kind of dry at some points, but at other points, I'm hitting like epiphanies from what you guys are saying, and I'm like, oh shit. Like, I didn't even think about burnout until you brought up burnout. Like, I'm just
Really?
thinking.
So important.
I didn't even.
I've been doing this for so long
You gotta
that
consider
burnout
it.
has been part of the my consciousness probably since college, I guess. But I mean, but then there's like the Protestant work ethic culture of architecture students should just be doing all-nighters all the time. Right?
Yeah.
That's normal. Just drink more coffee, right?
Mm-hmm.
I only did 2 overnights. And those were basically, 2 finals in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I did theatre production in university, and when it comes for time to produce your fucking theatre show, everything is go, 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 go until it's finished. Sleep doesn't happen. Fuck it. But yeah, like in the
building a
activism
party
circles,
isn't.
we do see a lot of. Yeah, building a party is a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah.
And when you're running a marathon, you need to drink your water. You need to stop from time to time to fucking stretch.
Well,
You need your times of just walking, and then you're gonna have your times when you speed up a bit, and then you're gonna bring it down to a walk again.
It
Campaign
also
season.
colors what.
Wow. Yeah.
As a human being, how you view a certain thing or a certain activity or group that you interact with. If the only actual experience you have with a group, like with activism, is technically negative because it is a strain on you, on your mental and physical capacity and your resources, you're going to be a lot more jaded. Whereas if you do mix it up, if you have actual positive interactions, I mean, I get that, yes, the work itself is fulfilling, but those who do it, it is a bit more than that.
Have fun. Gotta have fun.
You have to have some
If you're
fun.
not having
I didn't
fun, you
consider
should probably
that.
stop what you're doing.
And this is my not so subtle way to segue into reminding Radhom to discuss the greatest democratic innovation ever.
Oh yes.
Shit, yeah.
Okay. This is off topic, but so look, Australia has some pretty decent election stuff. We've got preferential voting, so you can specify not just where you want your vote to go by party, but you can do it by candidate if you like. Proportional representation in some instances, but not others. We need more of it. We've got mandatory voting as well, but that isn't our greatest innovation. Our greatest innovation is something that you don't need a legal structure to do. It's the goddamn democracy sausage. Every time we have a local, state, or federal election, basically every single polling place has a barbecue. A local community organization will come and do fundraising. They'll do a sausage sizzle. These days it's become a lot more diverse. You've got vegan sausages, you've got fucking halloumi rolls, and it's like $2. You show up, you get your democracy sausage, you munch on it, and you stand in line waiting to vote, and then you vote and you go home.
That is the opposite of Florida. Oh my God.
Myself and so many of my friends, so many people I know are like, oh shit, it's election day. I'm so hungover. Oh wait, it's election day. I can go and get a fucking democracy sausage. Yes!
Right.
And it builds this positive association with wanting to go and vote. And it's this community thing. It raises money for local rec clubs or scouts groups or community halls. Yeah.
That's a great
democracy
idea.
Sausages.
Wow. That's tough to do in Florida. Handing out water bottles is illegal at some points.
And it could be depending. Well, see, in New York, it's only electioneering isn't allowed within 100 feet of the door. So maybe a cookout or some community event is allowed, and that's something that's never done.
And because
mostly because in Albany, Albany, we had a political machine that would no proof, of course, exists because it was completely ad hoc and under the table. But if you voted, you got $5. You would have people kind of handing out $5. It was called the $5 vote. It only kind of ended maybe in the 70s, but that's the thing.
That sounds cool.
No kind of. Sure.
That sounds cool as hell.
Well, and then that's kind of the
w-
way. Well, the political machine we had was like to
Was it
identify.
partisan? Is the question.
Of course.
Was it?
Oh, it's
Yeah,
partisan?
so it's like the Democratic Party or the Republican
I
Party saying, "Hey, you vote."
I misspoke. You Democrats get $5 for voting for Democrats.
Even better.
And so it was a very
Yeah.
well. This was a kleptocracy, and most Democrats in Albany are very conservative. So,
oh, wait.
it's not what you think.
Okay.
If you want to
New
try
York is not-
instituting,
Yeah.
if you want to try setting up democracy sausage stuff in America, getting around the anti-electioneering laws, so be very clear to not be affiliated with any party or group. Tie it to a well-known fundraising for a well-known and well-loved local community cause, like an animal shelter, something everyone can get behind, and charge a nominal fee to get a sausage. This means that you're not gifting it out to people, so that should help to get around like the Florida law with not being able to give water or food to people. It ties into the intrinsic American love of capitalism. If they're telling you not to sell sausages to fucking fundraise for a local thing, what? You just fucking hate capitalism, mate? Get out of here. This is fucking America.
Yeah.
Sorry, get out of here. This is fucking America.
Yeah,
The police
Yeah,
association
I think that a good-
does
oh, sorry.
cookouts all the time.
Yeah, I think that a
Yeah,
good workaround
really
is
good
also
idea.
like they give out stickers in Florida still. At least they still do that, right? They'll give you the damn sticker. I think that maybe if progressives in Central Florida where I live had something at like a local cool watering hole, like I'm trying to think of watering holes that would probably be open to it. Maybe like somewhere like the Nook, which is kind of like a bookstore, part bar / bookstore. And it's like, hey, turn in your I voted sticker. Here's a free beer or half off beer. I think that's pretty cool.
I don't mean to interrupt you, Taj, but the Nook did something like that.
Oh, they did? Oh my
They
gosh,
had
I'm
a
behind on the
free-
curve. Damn it.
Yeah, you must not have been around, but the Nook has been politically involved and engaged. You
I didn't
should
know about the sticker
definitely
thing.
hit up Danny. My former boss. I used to work for this person who opened this place that Taj is talking about. But yeah, no, Danny is absolutely open to stuff like that, and the other people at the Nook are as well. So like, it's already been done. Number one, and number two, like maybe get in contact with them. Like
That's a great
I can
idea.
Put you in contact.
Nah, I'm friends with them on
Wow.
Facebook too, Kayla. Come on.
Okay,
I'm not out of the loop.
whatever.
All right, I'm not all the way out of the loop.
They did something like that. And this was a couple years ago. It was like right when I moved. And I thought it was like really cool. So I think, there's opportunity there for that to happen again.
Yeah, that sounds like a slam dunk idea. I like that a lot.
So I wanted to
Whoa, maybe something like that with local candidates.
Other people jump in.
Oh, that's a good idea.
yeah, of course.
Sorry.
So I wanted to relate two more like kind of concepts. One, like the dark side, fear and hatred. Their source is kind of ignorance, and that goes into the political education where people aren't probably even aware of what class people are kind of in or what kind of privileges, and so on. Like I have $13,000 in my bank account, but I never really make more than that in a year, ever. But I rent from my parents, for example. So I keep my costs incredibly low. But I wanted to also explain something in terms of leftist collaboration in my area. So last year, or more than a year ago, we formed the Capital District United Left Front. So various leftist groups of all of a radical persuasion plus the DSA, which locally speaking is, because they do tenant organizing and stuff. Including
just checking, not to be confused with the People's Front of the Capital District.
No such thing exists.
Sorry, obscure Monty Python joke.
No, is it obscure? I mean, I literally saw like someone talking about like rebel writing and how like it's such a cliche of like eventually we gotta stop making jokes about the Judean People's Front and actually organize anyway. But in this case, it was all younger set, under 40, I suppose, and all, but mostly 20-somethings and 30-somethings, various groups, some of them communist clubs that I didn't even know existed, but mostly because they are social groups first, and this comes into play later. So one of the things that we've done in the past year is take over the reins from the aging 60s hippies of the organizing of our local May Day event. We always have a May Day event, and this time it was actually organized by the Socialist Party US chapter as underliners, but with support from all the other groups in the United Left Front. And it went really well, and we'll probably keep doing that every year from now on. But when it came to doing other collaboration, we could agree on one thing, that we weren't going to focus on running anybody for election this year, even though local elections are what are happening. We just consider ourselves to not have the resources, we don't have the numbers, we gotta be doing outreach first. Of course, are we doing that this year? Not really. Each group has its own sub goal, so to speak. Ours, as Greens, is to get our ballot line back, which was removed by former Governor Como. But
what do you mean by your ballot line?
Well, in order to run candidates easily, because petitioning is extremely difficult. Oh yeah, so as an Australian, you're probably not aware that America is probably one of the most undemocratic of democracies in the world.
I know this. I'm just not familiar with the term.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have in order to. Okay, so when you run for office, an enormous amount of petition signatures are required. Think 1,000 for even a local office, like 1,000.
Yeah, wow.
10,000 if it's a state assembly.
Yeah.
And if it's Congress, you need 50,000, and you need I think we need like 100,000 for governor.
Yeah,
and that's if you don't have a ballot line. If you have a ballot line, you only need
super skewed towards incumbents and famous people.
Right. If you can afford an army of petitioners, and you only get a month to collect them, by the way. States like Illinois and Georgia have extremely high. Basically, to keep anyone who isn't a major party candidate, or and you have to play a game with the establishment.
You do.
From running, and getting a ballot line is kind of a holy grail when you are doing independent politics. And that's why there's such an argument about, among DSAers, of how we need to run as Dems. It's the only way we can run anybody, even though that really takes a lot of your leverage away once you're in office. There's nothing more powerful than having
suddenly you're beholden to the DNC line and yada yada.
More so than a lot of entries seem to think. So as Greens, in New York, we're concerned about that and organizing for that and running a good gubernatorial race, because that's how we get our ballot line back.
Yeah.
And so in communist clubs just want to keep being clubs. So when in the summer last month or so, when they had their last United Front meeting, they basically they didn't get quorum, or half the groups didn't want to have a meeting because they didn't want to collaborate on anything. I guess maybe sadly, I can only guess, is it because Biden's president, you don't feel an urgency to do leftist projects? Or is it because even though we're all these separate groups and we could all agree that we should have a good May Day event, we seem to not be able to, we don't have the same strategy as far as a united left project. That's something that Zero Books mentions all the time, that there's no project.
Yeah. All right. I've noticed that a lot of organizing this year, 2021 in particular, hasn't really been as strong as 2020. I think there are a few factors why, and maybe it is Biden's president. So people feel less inclined to push left for some reason now. That's a possibility. I don't have evidence for or against that really, but I think it might just be people are still kind of tired from last year, even though it's late. What is it, Q3 2021 right now? But I don't think this trend's going to continue in 2022. I really do think we're going to see like more of an uptick. Things get more intense again. And then things might die down again in 2023. But I think election years is a big push for a lot of people. That's what I'm hoping. I don't want 2021 to happen next year or in 2024 because this year hasn't been hot.
Do you mind?
I
if
have
my thoughts. Yeah, we're getting really close to wrapping up statements right now, actually.
Can I just do mine? Because I really have to go. I just
of
got
course.
an important message.
Yeah,
I'm
do your thing.
sorry,
Do it.
everyone. Sorry. I also put something funny in the Discord.
Okay.
For later, for funsies.
Okay. Can you get back on
because
camera,
we're
Ed?
friends, right? Okay. So closing statements. I think what I got the most from this is just like, number one, it's like really cool to hear from people who are a little bit older than me. I know that the Occupy movement, like my aunt was a part of that, and I had a really good example of like organizing from some of what she did. Even though I don't agree with her completely with her political ideologies, it's a perfect example of like, I don't know, the conversation we had today. I organize with youth. Pretty much everybody I organize with is under 25. The youngest person I organize with is 16. So I don't have these conversations with people who are older than me. And so like really this was very very awesome to be a part of. I'm really grateful to be here, and thank you for having me in this space and listening to me and painting miniatures and facilitating and I don't know, being cool. And I really enjoyed this discussion. I hope that some of what I said sticks with y'all, and I know that a lot of what was said here I will be thinking about for a while. And I hope we can do this again. Oh my gosh.
If you'd like to see the model that I've been working on.
Oh shoot. That is
sick.
Cool.
What
Tabletop game?
Yeah, what game is that from?
Yes. This is a 40k miniature. It's 40K. For a board game called Blackstone Fortress.
Mm-hmm.
Oh cool.
But yeah, I have a lot of fun with that stuff.
That is pretty tight.
So they can see the little layout that we've been having here. So you've all been in the corner.
BabyGrandma, did you want to do any shout outs to any things in particular one more time?
Yeah, so I'm the founder of Metamorphosis Collective. The website is metamoboutique.com.
Metamobile?
On Instagram. Yeah, Metamobile, META, mobile boutique. .com, and then same handle on Instagram at Metamobile Boutique. On Facebook, it is Metamorphosis Collective. I also am the co-founder of a radical peer-led mental health resource for adults called Lavender Space. You can visit us
Lavender
at
Space?
Yep, lavenderspace.com. Yep. So those are my two things that I wanted to make sure to kind of put out there. But yeah, thank you so much for having me. And thanks, Taj, for facilitating. And thank you all for, I don't know, just talking. And
thank you for participating. Your perspective was very interesting. And
thank you, Kayla.
Brought some great things to the table.
Absolutely.
Yes, thank you.
Absolutely. Bye, everyone.
All right, bye.
Meeting you.
Gotcha.
All right, it's getting really close to 2.5 hours right now. Would everyone else like to do their wrapping up statements as well?
I did want to make one final comment.
Yes, of course, Frakkle.
So what? Okay, so I am going to speak as my 2010 self for a moment. I was not always politically engaged. I am a white cishet dude, growing up in a pseudo-conservative state here in Florida.
Florida.
Yeah. Actually, I'm pretty close. I'm familiar with the Nook, and I I'd be happy to have, dinner or lunch with you sometime. That would be awesome.
Holy shit.
But,
okay, let me add you on the Discord, man.
Yeah, for sure. But what I was going to say is I'm going to speak as my 2010 self, because what we're witnessing with a lot of this fall off of activism and a lot of the momentum being lost is that privilege coming full front. It is very easy for people like myself to just disengage because most of these issues, frankly, don't really impact us. They do, but I am straight up, I am comfortable enough that I could just totally detach from activism, and aside from the moral cost on my soul, I'd be fine. A majority of the electorate is in that position. They would benefit from the things that we advocate for, but they're kept just comfortable enough that it's easy for them to both disengage, and they're kept just busy enough that generally they're tired. That's not an excuse. It's just the reality of it. And a lot of the work is keeping people educated and keeping them engaged. And part of keeping them engaged is the aforementioned having some positive association with engagement, as well as the actual work involved in it. So I wanted to give that perspective a little bit, because it's something that I lived for, frankly, a shameful majority of my life.
Yeah. And I do think that kind of the perspective that the left is constantly infighting can be off-putting to a lot of people who might otherwise be interested in our projects, especially when it comes to things like purity testing. I mean, who wants to get involved with a set of social circles where they see that they will readily eat their own for very minorly saying what could be considered the wrong thing? So in that way, I think that it, just to bring things back around to leftist infighting again, and I know this discussion has roamed far and wide, but I think that it does harm our ability to pull in quote-unquote normies. But then so does leaving certain ideas unchallenged. I mean,
True.
A normal liberal person is going to look at a literal Stalin-worshipping tanky and go, Jesus fucking Christ, you don't even want democracy? No, I don't want anything to do with that. Yeah. So, we do need pushback, but we need to balance that so that we're not being petty over bullshit that doesn't matter. Kind of, yeah. It's a push and pull.
There's more constructive ways of raising those criticisms than throwing, verbal Molotovs, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of verbal Molotovs in my time. But
I think we've all done a little bit.
You will get burned eventually. That's the thing.
Yeah.
I kind of wanted to throw in a closing statement / suggestion. So for my closing statement, obviously, we did, what are our anecdotes? What have we done, et cetera, et cetera. I think that the best thing that we can do, for the first part of it, is recognize when the fighting is happening and be willing to just kind of be is this a fight that's worth happening? Should I involve myself? Maybe not literally, but take it into consideration, or is it just some stupid bullshit that you can just be oh, no, I'm going to distance myself. I'm going to speak against this sort of fighting, because there are times that we should fight and times we shouldn't. And that leads into my suggestion. I think this should be a multi-part panel, because you did have a great question about how far are we willing to work with, but I mean, we couldn't get off that first point for various reasons.
Yeah. This is going to be a saga. There's going to be more panels. If anyone here is welcome to join
on your panels, Taj.
Yeah, and
I have,
because I want to do one on not infighting, but in dating. Is that something that how do we mitigate that? You know, as well as like entryism and recuperation, I think are some interesting things that those are some hot topics in my opinion. And everybody's welcome. Baby grandma's definitely welcome. I'll let them know about that.
And we can
after this meeting,
we can have a rotating crew here as well.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Splendid.
Yeah, because I have answers for some of those questions. Sometimes I was trying to weave them in what I was talking about. But obviously, kind of like with learning skills, there's just so much to learn. And I think it's better to know a little bit about a lot of things than specialize, since it's kind of the professional bougie economy wants us to specialize. So I kind of like doing the opposite, similar to how the structure of Twitch or YouTube wants specialization in blood sport and or lowest common denominator seeking. You know, as someone who's kind of canvassed a lot, well, okay, I don't want to go too far on it. So my closing statement is to join an org and work on projects. When you're actually working on something that matters to working people, or particularly non-prime voters, then you will learn things. And if there are no people worth teaching you, then there are tons of people from various orgs that want to teach you. And that's one of the benefits of joining an org. It doesn't really matter which kind. But really what I'm advocating for is having a political home. Because even though it feels like maybe being on Twitter or Twitch or in the chats, it kind of, or a Discord server, maybe it feels like a home. But these are social spaces like bars. They're not homes. They're not residential. They're commerce. They're platforms for commerce. Literally, you need a home. And I found it in the Green Party mostly because I just ran into at VegFest our current state co-chair, who identified himself and asked that he was a socialist. I'm like, wait, there are socialists in the Greens? I just thought it was left Democrats, and I don't want to be that. But when I learned that it had more radical edge to it, I found that it fit me as a left communist of sorts. So if you can afford it, pay dues, because even IWW and Greens are aware of people's limitations, and sometimes the dues are just $2 a month. They want everyone to contribute what they can, even if it's just their lower labor, or if they can't contribute labor, then $1 or so. Because that's how we can pay ourselves, or at the very least, get buttons and merch or whatever, and we don't have to go through, and we can make it union made and do all the things that are more ethical under capitalism. So that's kind of where I'm at. And then you'll learn all the skills that you need or should have along the way, including how to be mature and act politically. Because I feel my observation as someone who's 32 is that Twitch and Twitter is nowhere to actually get a political education.
That's for sure.
It's really a little disgusted sometimes at how much money gets thrown around in Twitch streams and how much is made by certain producers when there are organizations that could be hiring people and not getting it. When people are obviously on these forums and they want to contribute regularly to something, but posting is not politics. I mean, propaganding, of course, is, but eventually we need news gatherers. And we need news, not just interpreters, but news makers and news reporters, which is kind of why I've melded the two: propagandists doing my podcast, The Three Left Show, and community radio that involves local reporting, and even if it's just taking the Zoom recordings for public meetings and then picking out a good public comment out, that can be meaningful. And the Real News Network and Black Agenda Report and and other outlets are people to follow, models to follow. I guess I'll cut myself off.
So, quick question there. Do Americans use the term wobbly?
Wobbly?
Yes.
Yeah. Member of the IWW, wobblies.
Yeah, I have the song book, and though I'm not sure if I'm due pink member, I aspire to be one, I guess.
Cool.
Yeah, and I encourage it, even if it's IWW, if it's some socialist party that exists around you, SA, SPUS, Greens, or DSA, because there's still an internal debate there of whether they actually are a political party or just the left wing of the Dems, and that's a fight between locals and the national, which are the old guard. And that's a different conversation completely than infighting, though, of course, I think it actually dovetails. So I hope to do this again. I love all of you, including Kayla there. And and I love sharing this platform and doing all this stuff. The fact that I recognize you, Taj, from some other YouTube video I was watching.
Oh, shit, what?
Is gratifying.
Was it the one from The Good Liars, or?
I don't know. I couldn't tell you. It was 2 months ago. Okay. But the fact that now I'm 2 steps away from, people that I'm kind of both hate/love watching. I'm totally done with Vosh and other things like that. Like I watched him for a whole year, but then the election season started, and yeah.
Okay, that was a divisive time.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely understand that. Yeah,
discussion for another time, I think.
Definitely. See the amount of discussions that we can have. Oh man, and I hope maybe hopefully not as long, but hopefully in the future these things are just as enlightening as this one was. Because this one was only 6 people, but oh my gosh, there are a lot of takeaways that I've gotten. I hope you guys have had takeaways from this as well. Wow, what a treat.
So we're going around doing closings at the moment, yeah?
Yeah, we're still doing closings. Yeah, I guess that was probably my closing.
I think Mayhem hasn't gone yet.
No, I did my closing. I just wanted to give my
Okay, cool.
I just want to give a shout out to my channel really quick. You can check out the Mayhem Calling on YouTube. We also we do videos once a month. Excellent. And on Twitter, I'm at Trey Misanthrope. I'll type it in the chat so people can actually know how to spell it. But yeah, actually this month, I took a 2-month break from the podcast. This month, I actually have Professor Flowers on. So the 18th is when that will... Oh, no, not the 18th. The 16th is when that will debut.
I just hit the young subscribe button on YouTube. Actually, let me follow 3 Lefts as well while I'm at it.
I don't stream very often, though my dream is to be able, and this includes some tech work and when it's all volunteer, you really have to work with what you got. And right now I'm trying to get the goal is to have a good internet line in the studio so I can stream myself doing my live radio show. Until then, it's a lot of extra work to both do the podcast, edit it, and put it on the Pacifica Network, and then do some separate stream that I have to. I mean, it's not too much work to edit it since I'm using Twitch tools, but it's still something I haven't really had the will to do on a weekly basis. But I do have some content to watch. And of course, the podcast, I'm on episode 126. And I've been going for 3 years. Since I ran for mayor, which was kind of a disaster, but I won't get into that right now.
Wow, that's a whole different thing. That sounds interesting. Just learning more about that.
Oh, actually, on the infighting note, it was actually a disaster because I had a primary opponent in the Green Party.
Ooh,
guy who may have had a nebulous intent, because as soon as he won the primary, he completely ducked out of any activity. And I tried to get back at him by nominating him to be treasurer, so he had something that he had to do. But then, of course, he didn't do it. So he was a guy who made the excuse that I didn't ask him for my permission to run as our candidate. But he was a college student, the leader of the chapter, College Greens. But I didn't know he was staying in Albany. Not many college students stay in Albany, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't know this. So I asked everyone else in our chapter, are you okay with me running for mayor? It's not like we're going to have some great candidate. And he said, this was his excuse, that it would get us more attention to have a primary. Of course it didn't. I could have told him that. It wasn't going to get us attention. No one gives a shit. And then he beat me by 3 votes.
3.
And
Damn.
he was
Best
he
case
didn't-
sounds like a case of bruised egos. Worst case, something nefarious.
Yeah, I mean, some of my fellows kind of saw it as such. I'm not sure, but it was very suspicious that he didn't expect to win the primary, except see what he didn't know. What I was canvassing whole neighborhoods because I was running for fucking mayor of Albany, not the primary. So I didn't canvass the Greens more than once or 1.5 times, just to tell them that, hey, I'm going to be your mayoral candidate, but make sure you vote for me in the primary. Because, hey, I'm the guy with the freaking experience. I've done local politics. This guy is just getting out of college, and not that I don't respect him, but, you know, it was just fucking stupid.
Yeah. All right. So, sounds like we all got our closing statements in. Frakkle?
I haven't
Yeah,
quite.
I need to jump in and do a close.
Sorry about that, Radhom. Yeah.
And Frakkle too. Frakkle, do you want to go first?
I thought Frakkle did.
Sure. No,
Oh.
I hadn't.
Oh, you hadn't? Okay, my apologies.
He asked a question.
Ah.
So, first of all, I really appreciate being on here. I know it was not really planned. Thank you, Radhom, for asking if I could. So, really am thankful for the opportunity. This was definitely a more constructive panel than a lot of them that I've seen, and I really appreciate the tone that was maintained. Like you mentioned, it was dry, but at the end of the day, a lot of education and a lot of political discussion is dry, and frankly, that's just part of it. Dan mentioned that Twitch is currently not a good place for political education. I admit the general climate is not, but I think it can be a very good platform for it. My own channel on Twitch, Twitch TV/Frakkle, that is the tack that I take. I focus on education. I emphasize a lot of police abolition, but it's not the only.
never knew existed.
All right, and I think that's closing. How do I do the?
Oh shit! I forgot my tagline.
Oh yeah, do your tagline before I end the stream.
The Three Left Show for going in a different direction, or Three Lefts make a right.
Bravo, bravo, bravo.
All right,
Nice.
thank you everybody.
Very good, very good.
See you, viewers. Yeah.